Good morning, Mrs. A, and our esteemed guest for this morning, and our speaker who has agreed to join us and grace us with her presence this morning. I know that temperatures in some parts of the country are in the negatives, so therefore we appreciate you joining us this morning. I'm Vuisam Bali, and I go by many titles, but this morning I'm the host for this webinar as a mentee of the Mashobani Training and Mentorship Academy. Our guest today is Michelle Scott, and before I introduce Michelle, it is our tradition when hosting these webinars to dedicate a poem to the speaker and the topic for the day. So I'll be reciting, or rather reading, a poem by Dr. Seuss called The Lorex. But now, says the one seller, now that you hear, the word of the Lorex seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So, catch, calls the one seller. He lets something fall. It's a truffula seed. It's the last one of all. You're in charge of the last of the truffula seeds, and truffula trees are what everyone needs. Plant a new truffula, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it with fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from axes that hack, then the Lorex and all of his friends may come back. The topic for this morning is the impact of community development and the role that the more community trust plays in supporting community development. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. How are you?
How are you? I'm fine, thanks. How are you this morning, Michelle?
Definitely chilly. You are 100% correct about that. You'll see I'm fully wrapped up this morning. Yes.
I see so. I see so. It's lovely to meet you. I know that you know Mrs. Mashobani from, as she's one of the trustees of the board. And I've read your profile and kind of stalked you on social media and see that you're quite the nature conservatist, so to speak. Can you tell us more about your qualifications and what you do at More Trust before we get to the essence of today's topic?
Yeah, of course. I mean, even though I'm involved in community development, my passion really started in conservation and nature conservation back in the day. Essentially, I grew up going to the bush, almost every other month with my family, and it was part of who we were and part of our tradition as a family. And I want to almost say the bug bit quickly. From the age of 3, I was saying to my folks that I want to be a game ranger, or I want to be a zoologist, or whatever the case was. And I kind of chopped and changed, but it was always bush focused. And when I finished school, I went to go study nature conservation and did my honours. And focused really on environmental education, and that's what I'm busy doing my master's on, is environmental education and community-based conservation. So the more I worked in conservation and doing different research projects and working with different reserves, the more I saw the highlight of the importance of community development as a part of conservation focus. And over time, my love moved towards community. And even though, I still have strong ties to conservation, I'm very privileged to do what I do. And the fact that I get to link communities back to conservation is my absolute purpose. Yeah.
Thank you for that brief intro, Michelle. It's absolutely spectacular. I know that most of us resonate more with personal development, as journeys are mostly personally linked to you, and whether it's your professional or your emotional or your family ties. Can you briefly explain to us what is the concept of community development in your view?
Yeah, I mean, community development to me is communities and partners and links within a community working together to solve problems within their own community. So it's really kind of looking at communities working for themselves, and less people around focusing on those communities specifically. But essentially, a community is the most basic unit of a social structure. You have your family unit, and community is next. And in order for us to see national development or societal development, we need community development in all regions to take place. So really it's communities working for themselves to develop and grow and solve their own problems.
So I see on your, I did quite a lot of reading on the More Community Trust website, and I see that you've got 4 core corporate social investment schemes. Can you tell the audience more about what those 4 entail and what kind of projects the trust is involved in?
Yeah, of course. So MCT, I'm the general manager for MCT. We are the corporate social investment arm for a tourism and conservation group called More Family Collection. We work in South Africa and into Zimbabwe as well. And we focus on, 4 main core pillars. So we have 21 projects which fall into those 4 core pillars. So our focus is through education, which is ECD all the way up to tertiary development, skills and enterprise facilitation, then improving living standards, and then our last core pillar is providing clean water. So those are our kind of headers, and then our projects fall within those headers. So because we work in so many different regions, we go into an area, we communicate with the community. All our methodology is done through asset-based community development. So looking at what the community's assets are, what are they mobilizing, what are their skills, and supporting them to mobilize their own assets, to say, okay, well, this is the needs of the community, what can we work on? So every single community is different. So every project is different, every strategy in every region is different. And because every community has different traditions, has different cultures, has different assets, has different needs, we really have to kind of be flexible with how we work and where we work and what we do. So even though we have these 4 core pillars, they're kind of our umbrellas. But our projects range, and they because we're such a small company, we're able to adapt quite quickly. So if we go into an area and we're working on something that is a bit new for us, a great example is up in Zim. We work with a community that's in a Big 5 area, so they're in a conservation area. So, even though it doesn't fall into our core pillars, we support with environmental education, we support with human-wildlife conflict mitigation, because they have very different, I suppose, problems than some of the communities in South Africa. So it's really, we have 4 core pillars, but we always tap into whatever the needs are of the community.
I think it's quite commendable, to say the least, because I see that within these core schemes that you guys are involved in, some of them speak to constitutional values and rights, such as access to clean water, where sometimes the government might be lacking, but schemes such as yours are doing quite a commendable job. And so I see that the revolving theme in your projects is sustainability. And I echo those sentiments, because, what is the point of development if it's not sustainable? How do you ensure that this core theme is seen throughout all your projects? Yes, followed through. Thank you.
I think the anchor to any sustainability within community development is the community onboarding the programs. So because we need the projects to be community driven and not NPO driven, not external business driven, that's really what takes the project forward. So if you don't have community buy-in, or if the community are not involved with the program from the start, then things start to fall apart. So for us, critically, it's a development plan where the community eventually are able to take this forward by themselves, but also with their buy-in and with their input and with their understanding of what this program's about, and then training and facilitating them to have the skills to manage that project. So really, it's community engagement. It's absolutely critical to the sustainability of any project. So there's obviously different, other little different things. The social structure of the community is really important. So if the whole community don't buy into something, even just the community members on a committee that we're working with, then things, tend, and you're going to have ups and downs. No community development program is smooth sailing. It is a bumpy ride. And I think if you go and expecting it to be smooth sailing, you're going to be disappointed. But certainly it's about handling every kind of peak and trough, and making sure that the community are fully engaged, fully educated on the topic, fully skilled to manage it themselves, and you're not going and saying, this is what you need. You're going in and saying, you're a wonderful community, what do you guys have? What do you guys need? How can we help you solve your problems?
So I think with any initiative that's community-based, you'd love to help absolutely everybody, but yeah, like you said, it's not always possible. So there might be someone listening who might be interested in maybe being one of the beneficiary projects. Can you explain the process of being adopted as a beneficiary process, and what are some of the challenges that beneficiaries experience when approaching you guys with this kind of proposal?
Sure. Hey, I mean, as you say, we are a drop in the pond, you know, you know, even so, there's so many other wonderful NPOs out there that are all working and collaborating together to make a bigger impact. So certainly we work in certain communities, in certain villages. Unfortunately, we're not able to work everywhere. Just as you say, it is what it is. We're only so big. But certainly what we find is there's a lot more need than what we can solve. So people approach us, we have our core pillars, which also enable us to say, no, this is what our focus is, this is where we see the impact. We work with communities to build like a bit of a development plan for each community, so we know where we see the development focus going. So if hypothetically, if a school approaches us for support, you know, or a local business enterprise that is needing development, and he approaches us or she approaches us, they submit a proposal, they submit their budget, they explain what they're trying to achieve. We then kind of vet it quite thoroughly to say, is this part of the development process that we are able to support? Firstly, do we have the skills and the funding to support this this project? And also, does it fit into the criteria of where we and the community want to develop to? You know, a big one is we often get approached by local soccer teams, for example, that want us to sponsor the team or want us to sponsor kit. And we get approached by so many. And as much as we really would love to sponsor all of them and support all of them, you know, we know our money is better spent to other projects in those communities that will help to kind of reform those communities and build those communities. So it is always tricky. I think we get so many proposals and requests for support, and we turn down so many. But I think when we see something that we see value in, even if it's out of our scope, you know, we'll always kind of step in and see how we can support or see how we can fundraise. But essentially, it needs to kind of be within the development plan of the community that, you know, that we are part of.
I can imagine. I'm sure you do get a lot of proposals which aren't quite in your 4 core pillars and your other projects. I agree with you that, I mean, businesses are essentially members of the societies in which they operate. So they do sort of owe being good corporate citizens. Now, in that same vein, what is your take on CSI as a form of brand strategy?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's such a politically heavy question at the moment. But you know, we've come from such a tricky, messy, awful history. You know, especially in South Africa, Zimbabwe as well. You know, we had an apartheid legacy that absolutely tore us apart, tore our structures apart, tore society apart, created poverty, created violence, created segregation. And we're seeing, however many years later, we're seeing and we're feeling that burden of that impact. And, you know, if we don't all work together, if we don't all give something to trying to develop this community, this society, and this economic kind of development in this nation, then things are going to fall apart. So as much as we all as individuals have a role to play, I really do believe that, as you say, businesses do have a responsibility, and it better serves them going into the future, you know, for us all to kind of benefit from this economy. So I do believe that as difficult as it is for a lot of businesses, I think CSI strategies are really important. And we're seeing the impact, especially where we're seeing so much money being lost to corruption. we are seeing the impact of CSIs coming through and supporting community development, supporting conservation, supporting education. And I think without that, I can't imagine where our country would be. You know, if all of that money hadn't been invested in the last 27 years, 28 years, I mean, I can't imagine where we'd be. Yeah. So, I mean, as much as it's tough, I believe it's critical for our national development.
I quite agree with you there, Michelle. It's been quite a rocky road for lack of better synonyms and less emotion provoking synonyms. Now, in that same vein, I'm sure you're quite aware that documents such as the King Report speak about CSI. In your view, not MCT specifically, but in your view, do you think that most businesses would still engage in CSI schemes if it wasn't for reports such as those?
I mean,
and
it's
sort
a
of the
good
license to
question.
operate?
It's a good question. I think it always depends on who the management and board of directors are behind those organizations. I mean, not wearing the MCT hat, you know, we are the CSI organization of a group that is their CSI program is solely driven by purpose and you know, I mean, they're not doing it because they have to. They're genuinely doing it because they seek value and they want their communities and their neighbors to develop with them. And I think a lot of businesses in South Africa have that same view. They want to be a part of the process. They want to be a part of development. So I think you would certainly see a lot of profit-driven companies. I mean, all companies are profit-driven, but guys who have that as their sole focus, I'm sure you would see tapping out of that system if they didn't have to. But I think South Africa definitely, as a group of citizens and a group of businesses, we are all about supporting and helping each other. And we have seen that now more than ever in the last week and a half, you know, through all the unrest and through it. I mean, no one is required to help, no one is required to support, no one is required to clean. So we know that as a group of South Africans, we are wanting and willing to help and support and develop. And I think that doesn't change, you know. So you may have those that drop out, but I think essentially a lot would still want to give back through some program or another. Yeah. And certainly in Zim, we see it out of interest, you know, because we don't have a similar program that side. And a lot of businesses want to give back to the development of their communities.
That's quite impressive. To our guests, I forgot to mention, if you've got any questions or any remarks that you'd like to make or ask me or Michelle, you're more than welcome to drop your questions in the chat box. And the last 10 minutes of the chat will be dedicated to Michelle responding to those. Michelle, we spoke about this concept of personal development sort of being the prime, you could say, objective of most people and most entities. How do you think that community development translates into Ubuntu as opposed to personal development?
I mean, it almost is the theme of Ubuntu, you know, the story that always resonates with me with Ubuntu is the children that were, you know, a child that chose not to take the entire bucket of sweets, but rather keep them for the entire class, you know. And I think that's it is literally about the community. It's literally about everyone sharing in the assets and the resources and the profit and the, you know, and the opportunity. So definitely, you know, we've been through, it's such a complicated topic, but if we don't as individuals and citizens, if we don't see the importance of developing ourselves personally, then our communities are not going to develop and we're not going to be able to come up. So understanding and being aware of how important it is as an individual for you to grow yourself, for you to educate yourself, for you to develop for your families, for your society, for your community, and for yourself. I mean, that is absolutely critical. But the selfishness that we see, especially through corruption and everything, I mean, the amount of money that's been lost and the amount of development that could have happened with that money we are seeing this kind of selfishness. Instead of the Ubuntu, we share everything that we have, and how can we better grow everyone together as opposed to growing you as an individual. But for you to have that mindset, you need to understand that we all need to develop, and you need to develop. So it's kind of saying it's important for you to have those values of personal development, to want to grow. But otherwise the whole system of Ubuntu growing together is not going to happen. If you have 20 people that aren't interested in personal development, nothing's going to happen. But you need 20 people that see the value of personal development, but see the value of developing together as a community and sharing the assets that we have. That's critical to what we do. It's not saying you having and you not having, it's saying, how can we grow this community together? And that's where kind of the importance of education comes in. It is definitely, even though it's one of 4 pillars, most of our projects come from education, because we literally, it's without it, nothing is possible. If we don't have a group of people that are willing to develop themselves, there's no Ubuntu. Yeah, because people won't see the purpose of sharing and growing together.
Shout out Janine. I see that Janine there agrees with you, Michelle, that she likes the connection that you make from a personal development to community, and how they're all actually intrinsically linked, because one, I think, cannot happen without the other. You are quite right. You still need to, as a person, want to develop, because essentially you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you do need to empower yourself so that you can also empower your community. Michelle, unfortunately, I know that, we all know that the COVID-19 has done quite a number on a lot of businesses and a lot of initiatives. Yeah, and it's the inevitable situation that we find ourselves in. In your view, with specific reference to MCT, how has COVID impacted the projects that you're currently working on?
Sure. Hey, MCT, we started in 2002, so we've been going for 19 years. It's, we've had a good 2 decades. Without doubt, this has been the toughest 17 months in MCT's history. There's absolutely no question. From a support perspective, our mother company, our CSI organization that funds us, is a tourism business, and the impact that tourism has had is absolutely massive. So we are unable to do what we do. We're unable to fulfill projects without funding and without support from sponsors. It just, it's the bread and butter of any NPO. So certainly from that side, it's been a significant struggle to try and attend to the needs of all of our projects. We've set up these development programs, we've created the support structures for these projects, and we've created funding opportunities for them. And when you have as many as 21 projects, and then you fall into a pandemic like this one, to try and keep them all open, to try and keep them all going, to try and keep supporting all the beneficiaries has been such a significant struggle. And sadly, we've had to close down a few projects. We've had to assess what is critical and what is not, what we need to direct funding to, and what can kind of sustain itself. And it's been such an emotional process of figuring out, what is more important and what needs funding. And it's absolutely been devastating. Our communities, most of the communities that we work in, are dependent on these conservation, ecotourism, tourism structures, because they're so rural. Their employment and their economic development sources in this kind of wildlife economy. So as soon as conservation and tourism start to lose, all these communities start to lose. We've seen such a massive drop in employment. We've seen so much retrenchment happening, and these are for many of these communities. There's a breadwinner in each family, and as soon as that breadwinner loses income, the whole family struggles. So certainly we've had to change the way that we respond in the last 17 months. And like many NPOs, we had to kind of go back to basics and support with food parcels and make sure that communities are all have access to water and all have access to sanitation. It's been really, really difficult. And some of our big projects, like our computer center, our digital learning campus, which takes a lot of funding to keep running, has had to bear the brunt, and we're grateful that she's back open and running now. But it's been a significant challenge, and definitely we're seeing in the communities. We're grateful, certainly, that the communities that we work in are very peaceful and very, very holistic in how they approach life, and very community driven. So we haven't seen, especially through the unrest that we've just seen, we haven't seen any unrest in those communities. They've fiercely protected their assets and their people, which is amazing to see. And certainly when things get dire and people lose income and people lose jobs, you start to see violence picking up, you start to see crime picking up. So I mean, we're grateful that we haven't had to deal with some of those issues. But certainly it's been a massive struggle. It's been a struggle for our communities, for our people, for our beneficiaries, and certainly for us as a trust to make sure that we can still support all of the projects that we've committed to.
Sure, I can imagine. That sounds like quite, a situation. It wreaked havoc on all sectors, more especially for initiatives like MCT, because you've got communities who are relying on this funding that comes from ecotourism, and with the state of the country right now, that must have been quite. But what do you think the MCT could have done maybe, or could have done better to make sure that they were better equipped to survive something like this, or can survive something like this in the future?
Sure, I mean, that's a very good question. And I think it's something that we've been reviewing constantly in the last 17 months. It's how, if something had to happen like this again, how are our communities better supported? How are we better supported? Certainly, something that's come to forefront during all of this is the factor of food security. And certainly, so much investment was made on food parcels. And I think if we focus better on, providing better agricultural programs in our communities that we work in, then you wouldn't have this immediate food, food crisis. So definitely food security has become a huge one, and looking at how we can better support communities through that. Certainly for ourselves, and I think a lot of NPOs have kind of reflected on this, is sustainable income sources. So, I mean, we're seeing a lot of different NPOs that are setting up sustainable businesses that then flow back over into them. And certainly the same goes for ourselves. The fact that we are, majority of our funding comes from different tourism businesses is certainly not sustainable for us. So we're looking at how can we create other funding solutions, and tap into different industries that will better support our communities, so that when one industry struggles, we aren't dependent and we don't struggle. But certainly, I mean, I think the other big challenge for us is because our communities are so rural and so far out of urban areas, and certainly then sitting on the borders of tourism and conservation areas, it's very difficult for when there's such a small employment base. There's very little else going on there. So for us to really focus on the development of the economy in these communities, of local businesses, it means that there's a bigger variety of opportunity going on. So when things do happen, you don't have everyone falling apart because they're all dependent on one sector or one industry. So it's, I mean, there's so many different things. And definitely as MCT, we need to look for better fundraising sources. We need to kind of stretch our wings out of tourism, out of conservation a little bit. And for our communities, we need to better set them up and structure them so that they can firstly feed themselves, and food security is a big one. But there's a more bigger variety of income sources and enterprises in a region that the communities aren't dependent on one sector.
All right, Michelle, I hear you. It sounds like you guys are on a trajectory of sorts to ensure that if something like this or worse does hit the country again, you've got measures in place to try and mitigate the harmful effects of things like the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I hear that you're part of 21 projects. That's quite, it's quite a lot. So which project do you think stands out for you and can be used as sort of and can be used as a blueprint maybe for other NPOs out there to learn from and to get community development on a sustainable trajectory?
I mean, you're going to get me in trouble because we have so many projects and so many beneficiaries that, and I suppose, every project that we are involved in, we are involved in because we see the benefit and we see the importance. So it's really tricky. And because each community is different, it's also really complicated to say one project is more important than the other because in one area, it's vital that we focus on this, and in another area, it's vital that we focus on this. So, but I think for me, let me kind of, let me not specifically focus on one project, but for me, the importance of education cannot be undermined. It is absolutely critical. So from whatever community we work in, education is still key and core to development and community development. So definitely the projects where we are seeing a phenomenal change is where we are lifting up the level of education to the urban areas, to certainly through digital education. So access to digital education, access to material that provides our children of today to be a part of the economy of our future is critical. So that's where we're seeing a phenomenal difference, and providing easy, reliable, and I mean, I don't want to say free, but education at a reduced cost is going to be critical. So for us, certainly education is key. So I don't want to say there's one project that's more important than the rest, but I mean, certainly education is where we're seeing the biggest impact. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
All right. So you think that education, in essence, is the one pillar that you feel would advance community development?
Certainly.
Well,
without
maybe.
doubt.
Okay, without a doubt. All right, Michelle. I think I want to read a comment here from Janine Ward. Janine says that I love what Michelle is saying about the link between personal and community development. It's critical. We need strong, confident individuals to create strong, confident communities. Any shout out you'd like to give to Michelle? Oh, yes, in response to that? To Janine, sorry.
I mean, yes. Janine is one of our trustees. So she is the bread and butter of More Community Trust. So I'm very grateful for her comments. But certainly, there's she's also heavily involved in asset-based community development training. So she's really at the ground of working with communities, enabling communities, and bringing communities into the greater picture. So thanks, Janine. Yeah.
Before I take a question from Sivu, Ms. Vachovani is actually my mentor. So I'd like to know, and I think our guests would also like to know, since they watch her webinars all the time, what it's been like working with her and what value you think she has brought to the Board of Trustees in terms of community development. Yeah. I
mean, trying to highlight everything that she's done for us is, I think, impossible, but certainly to have an energized board that really see the value and have passion for what we're doing. So are wanting to get their hands dirty themselves, wanting to give back themselves, wanting to throw all their energy into what we're doing, is absolutely huge. And it's really taken our trust onto a new trajectory. And certainly Anastasia, with her wisdom and awareness around governance and around structures and around the kind of right protocols and what we should be focusing on is critical. And her passion and energy, I think 100%, it energizes the rest of us. So we're very, very grateful to have her on our team. And she really is I suppose, that ethical guiding light that ensures that we all staying within, we know what's happening. We know what's happening around us from a legal and governance perspective. And she just keeps injecting energy back into all of us to keep us going. So, I mean, it's been absolutely incredible having her on the team.
So you do think that specific types of individuals forming part of a board of trustees does affect its functioning and does affect the projects that it takes on? What do you think are some of the prime qualities? What are some of the prime qualities you think, Michelle, a trustee should have in order to foster community development?
Look, I think we know every person's different. Every person comes with different IQ and EQ skill sets, and you need that balance of people. You know, you can't have a board that is made up of one type of person, and we have 5 of those people. We need a variety. We need guys with high IQ. We need guys with finance and legal perspective. We need guys with the strong EQ perspective that is able to come in and say, okay, but think about what's happening here. Think about what communities are feeling. Think about what our beneficiaries are feeling. So certainly high EQ is a big one for me. You know, you're working with people, you're working with beneficiaries. And always a question that I ask to myself and to our team is, how is this impacting our beneficiaries, and how, what decision that we're making now is impacting on them? So taking away the mirror from ourselves and how this is impacting us, and focus on how it's impacting them. So I think for me, strong EQ is really, really important, especially with the work that we're doing. A structure and calmness, I think, is really important. You need to get your work done. You need to know what's happening. You need to be on top of things. Boards, I mean, it's a high pressure and high level position. You're responsible for the be all and end all of that organization. And from a financial perspective, from a fundraising perspective, from a legal perspective, that responsibility falls on you. So you need to be critical, you need to have critical thinking, you need to be open-minded, you need to be responsible, and really focus. But at the same time, working with a nonprofit, you need to kind of have that passion, have that purpose, have that drive, have the energy to kind of keep the projects and programs going, and not just be a stagnant board member that's sitting there and not involved and not engaged. So I think, we've got such a well-balanced board where we have a bit of everyone. We have a nice, well-balanced personality set. So, in any kind of meeting, in any kind of engagement, any situation, we have that nice balance where we're able to bring in all those different personalities, those different opinions, and that's really critical. So as much as we have different skill sets sitting on our board that bring that value, it's really important that we have different personalities that kind of balance us all out.
I agree with you there, Michelle. I think community development does require a holistic approach and different people with different expertise coming together towards a common goal. I do agree with you there. We've got a question, Michelle, from Lungile Mapete, who says that, how do you make community interested in personal development that ultimately enriches the community?
How do you make community interested? I mean, essentially, education boils down back to this, because if you have an educated community, they see the value in personal development and they see the value in upskilling their community. So education is critical. If you have an uneducated community, I mean, they won't see the value. They don't understand the value always. So that's really critical. Definitely what we have found also is doing skills development with breadwinners. So the guys that are leading families and developing their families is really important as well. We are able to bring on the right skill set in a head of a household, then immediately he or she entrenches those same values into their children. So that's really critical as well. So, but it is a complicated situation. If we go into an area and we start doing a feasibility, understanding what the needs are, and the community aren't interested, then I mean, our support is best served elsewhere. It's where the communities want to develop, want to support each other, and want to grow, and they reach out to us and say, please, this is what we want to achieve. This is where we see ourselves. Help us kind of immobilize and help us establish and help us develop, and we work with them. But certainly personal development, I mean, it's critical, and you see it all the time. but with those that haven't had the opportunity to be educated. So I still think it goes back to education.
So on this feasibility studies that you run, Sivu has said something quite interesting in the chat. And Mala, if possible, could you please unmute Sivu to please pose the question to Michelle? Because I feel that it needs a bit more elaboration before she can answer the question. Mala, can you do that? Are you there?
Yes, I'm going to try. I think Anastasia is good from her side.
Yes.
Anastasia, can you
Sivu has-
unmute Sivu?
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can, Sivu.
Yes.
Okay, the reason, let me start maybe to just give a background in terms of how I came about to actually even do the survey. It was just an observation and saying, you know, people develop their communities. That was my belief. And so I was bothered by why people, instead of fixing something, they just leave and go carry on to what is already going right. So I set out about this survey on my Facebook page and say, can those guys that are living in the suburbs just tell me, what is it that they did not like that made them leave the townships? Or what is it that attracted them to the suburbs? It was just a survey, you know, a catch-all kind of. I said, this is not trying to point fault or something, you know, but I must tell you, out of that, overwhelmingly, a lot of it was about they don't like the state in terms of cleanliness in the townships. And the question is, who's making this litter? It is us, the community, you know. So when people leave and sort of go and find what works in other area, they like the peace of mind and clean spaces in the suburbs and everything, and that just gave me an idea. Of course, I'm not saying I followed up on that, but now that you're talking about community development, I just thought this is something that one could actually pursue, not for anything, but I'm really, really bothered that everyone loves or wants to live in a space where they love where they are. So if they don't love that place, definitely they will leave. It is the same thing that you find in our schools. It is the same thing that you find everywhere. Because when people, it seems to me that people find, they don't find that they're capable of changing what they don't want. They'd rather go and things are already functioning well. And I think it ties well with what you're saying in terms of community development. Yeah.
I mean, certainly, you're 100% correct. It's amazing that you did that survey, and I would certainly love to hear more, and maybe on a side conversation about what you learned. Because specifically, we very rarely work in any townships. We work really in rural areas. So I definitely think that there's, as you said, there's a different mindset. I certainly believe there's a different mindset in townships than there is in rural areas. You know, a lot of guys who come through to the cities to find work settle in a township, and as you say, you know, when they want better for themselves or they're not comfortable with their environment, they then move into these suburban areas. But environmental kind of awareness, environmental development, and I suppose kind of a happiness for what's around you and what you have access to is really critical. So if you're growing up in an area where you don't feel like your children are going to get access to the best education systems, where you're not getting the water, you know, that you need, or your basic human needs met, if life is hard where you are, then the natural thing is going to be to go and find an area where you have better access to all these things that make life comfortable for you and your family. And certainly jobs and employment is a big part of that. If you're unable to find employment or work or income in your area, naturally you're going to gravitate out to an area where you are. And certainly that's key to what we're trying to do is how do we support communities by building local enterprises so that there are more jobs available, there is more income available. Education is of a level that communities are proud of, and that's part of the system, it's part of the curriculum. So people are they're finding their comforts and they're finding their personal development within the community that they live in. So, I mean, it's absolutely brilliant what you brought up, and I would love for us to kind of connect directly and understand some of the survey feedback that you found.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for answering Sibu's question. Mala, could you please unmute Koli? I see that the hand has been up for quite some time.
Okay, Anastasia, can you unmute? I don't see him on the chat anymore.
You don't?
Yeah.
Okay, while you're trying to find him, we can move on to the next question. So, Michelle, there is a question about political division. How do you get people on board without any political kickbacks?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a complicated one because you always have underlying people in any community that want to drive that political agenda forward in anything that's done. So we have a very strict mandate where we don't get involved in politics. We work with a committee that's structured and developed out of the community leadership. If there's change, we'll follow the guidelines of the traditional councils of who's the responsible person, who we're working with. But we've seen it often where we have uprisings in communities that are politically driven, and they certainly create a massive snowball effect on the projects and development programs that we're trying to institute. Like we don't play politics. We don't step into that world at all. We are aware of who's playing in the area. We're aware of what their agendas are for their communities. But we essentially work with a community committee that's set up and responsible for the development of that community. And that's with members of the community then nominate. So we are working with the community. That is our priority. So the community nominate the individuals that want to work on their development, and we work with them. No matter where they're from or who they are or what their political background is, we don't get involved in that aspect. But we certainly have seen political unrest in the communities that we work in, and we just make sure that we don't get involved. We don't entertain any negativity that's drawn up, between, oh, but you guys are supporting these guys and not supporting these guys. Yeah, and we really just try and focus on our beneficiaries of the community and how we're helping them.
Thank you, Michelle. It seems Koli is back. Could we unmute Koli, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Koli.
Oh, that's good. Thank you guys for this such a good conversation. In fact, this is what what need to happen, for every community. It's very important, but it's not only important, but it's compulsory. In fact, it's a compulsory project and subjects that we need to talk about, And then I hear you spoke about King Report. I just want to touch for a second there. I think many small businesses, especially from home, I'm from Kwamhlanga, by the way. So the reason why they don't participate that much, I think it's because the state have neglected these small businesses. So the sense they have, they will try to, to put on their pocket, but also it's upon, all ourselves as communities to take this as our responsibility, Yeah, so I just want to, in short, because I see now it's 20 past already, just to, to say thank you so much, guys, for this conversation. I had to leave at home early because supposed to attend, but thank you. I appreciate the conversation, and I'm enjoying it. I wish it can happen maybe much longer, or maybe we can have 2 hours or afternoons, let's talk about this, because we need to transform this. We must stop. I think now we must stop some of engagement, but we must be practical and take action. Thank you, Michelle, for for what you are doing as well. Hope one day we'll meet and we'll contribute what we can do. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. I mean, you make such a good point about less talk, more action. But certainly, there's many voices out there that are wanting to connect, are wanting to give back, and the more we can collaborate, the bigger the impact we can make. And certainly we work with many different NPO forums where we collaborate in different projects and work together. And I think a conversation where we involved some of the different NPO forum members would be really productive. So thank you for your comments. Yeah, definitely. And hope we can meet and connect again soon.
Yeah,
I hope so too, Michelle. And for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for attending. And next up, we have Suvi.
Hello.
Mala, could you
hear me okay?
unmute Suvi?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes.
Yes,
Suvi,
we can
hi.
hear you.
Hi, good. I was thinking about while listening to this. First of all, thank you, Michelle, for a really great speech and ideas and sharing your thoughts on this topic. Do you see that there would be need from involvement from international community, or let's say engaging people from different countries, for example?
I mean, certainly from our perspective, a lot of our investment comes from overseas. So let me just say categorically that a lot of our donors and sponsors are overseas travelers that travel to South Africa and get involved. And certainly our main sponsors through tourism are dependent on international revenue. So, I mean, without a doubt, I can say yes, we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for international investment. So I think it's absolutely critical. And we're seeing a lot of conservation and community development projects across Africa being sponsored by overseas aid programs. So, I mean, I think it's absolutely critical. And I think, we as an organization, we try and pull funding and support from wherever we can. And I think for international awareness of what happens in our communities and what's happening in Africa and how we are developing, because I think there's such a weighted perspective of what Africa is and what South Africa is and what our communities are and what we're all about and what we're capable of. And I think it's critical that the international communities are able to see how much we have developed and what we are capable of. What we are capable of, what Africans are capable of. We have such an incredible group of people, and it's important that we share our strengths and share our values. So certainly our international clientele that come out to our conservation areas, we certainly offer community experiences. We don't offer tours in the sense, but they're called Get Your Hands Dirty experiences, where anyone is able to come out to our projects and help with the actions and projects of the day. So you don't just come around and meet and greet and play with children. You come in and help us cook, or you come in and help us clean. If we're building rooms, you come in and help lay bricks, or you're painting, or you're working in the veggie gardens. And that's been an incredible opportunity for the international guests that we have to be able to see what we're doing and to meet the community, see what they're about, understand their cultures, understand their traditions, and learn a bit more about Africa than what they see on the news, especially. So I think it's absolutely important. Africa is a quickly advancing continent, and we need the international world to see that we are players on this planet.
I think that's absolutely true, because very often the view to Africa, South Africa, or anywhere else in Africa might be really one-sided, or a little bit focused from one point of view only. So I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Certainly, yeah.
Mala, do we have any more hands in case I might have skipped anyone before Michelle and I consolidate?
No, there's no hands up for now.
Okay, thank you.
We're done.
Mala. Okay. Michelle, yes, quite an interesting talk that you and I have had this morning. And I personally have also picked up a lot of new things that I did not know about community development, because like I said, most people resonate with personal development and forget that the master plan or the bigger idea is to get the community engaged as well. So now, as a closing remark, Michelle, what would you like everyone who attended this webinar to take home with them today?
I think, you know, a big one is understanding that we all need to kind of help and support each other. You know, I think like everyone else, I've been blown away with the response to the unrest last week, and it highlights for me that citizens of our country, we do have the majority, have the heart to give back and support each other. So I think the big one is to, I suppose, take action, as some comments have said. Do take action. Try and do something that supports a program nearby. Don't go into an area and say, this is how I perceive the community and how I perceive their struggles, and this is what I want to do to help. This is what I think they need to be. So rather go in, communicate, learn, and understand what their needs are and what they want to do to develop. And yeah, so I think take that glass view of, because this is the way I live, this is the way they should live, and rather go in and say, we all are different, we all come from different traditions and cultures, and how do you live and how do you want to develop and how can I better support that? So I think for me, it's taking away that that perception of we should all be at one specific place. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you for joining us today. I've had an absolutely amazing time speaking to you and enjoyed the comments coming from our guests as well. And could you please just tell us quickly, how can we get in touch and how can we get involved and assist in this?
Yes, so you know, please do follow us on Facebook and Instagram, More Community Trust. We have a website, www.morecommunitytrust.co.za, where you can find more information, where you can give back, where you can donate, where you can look into our projects. We also have, thank you, Marla, for my email there, but you just need to add another E at the end of Michelle. But certainly anyone is welcome to contact me on email or even on my number. And always willing to chat and willing to provide opportunity. We do also have 2 big fundraising events every single year. One is a big virtual run. It's normally a trail run, which goes to our rural communities, but this year it's a virtual run called the Extra Mile. So come join us and go the extra mile for our communities and conservation. And you can find all the information on our website there. And then our second one is a big golf day that we're hosting in October, on the 29th of October here in Johannesburg. And if you'd like to get involved or participate and give back, you're welcome to. So you can pop me an email and I can share more information with you, or you can have a look on our Facebook or on our website, and you can find out more about how to get involved, how to contact us. Come and get your hands dirty, or you know, if you just want to sponsor, you're welcome to. But always keen to involve in engagements and conversations like these. So even if you just want to reach out for a conversation, we are always fully available. But we're really grateful. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you, Michelle, and I'm sure everyone had a ball of a time, and they will surely get in contact, as I know for one, I'm interested in the golf day in Johannesburg. I'm hoping to see you there.
Yes,
definitely,
it's going to be lovely.
I will see you there. Marla, is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye to Michelle?
No, I think we've done very interesting topic and conversation. Thank you so much, Vuyiswa, for hosting. You've done extremely well, and we're so proud because you're one of our mentees of Mashobane training and mentorship program. So it's great that you agreed to do this, to host this webinar. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Michelle, for such a wonderful topic discussion. You know, there's so much that we've learned. Thank you very much. I think we can actually conclude.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everybody has a lovely day, and see you all at the golf day, those who are in Joburg.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.